Okay, cool. All right, it's 4:30. Let's boogie.
Let's do it.
Okay, so hi, I'm Dr. Traci Potterf. I'm a functional medicine or functional health anxiety detective. I help people find the hidden causes of their anxiety and other chronic health problems. Ooh. And I'm dogs and cats sitting right now, so you might hear some animal noises in the background. So, okay, and then we have Jessica Rohr. So Jessica is my shero. She owns Forage Hawaii Sustainable Meats. And I want you to tell us, instead of me using my own words, I want you to tell us what you do and how you got into this. I love what you do. You're awesome.
Thank you. I am a meat purveyor. I sell local meat at the farmer's market and at my warehouse. And I basically find local farmers in Hawaii that are raising animals in a regenerative fashion in some kind of environmentally friendly way. And then we sell frozen back sealed cuts of meat. I'm also a self-proclaimed bone broth queen. I love bone broth, so I make hundreds of gallons of bone broth, and we wholesale that through FarmLink, and we retail it at our stores. We're about to launch a butcher box where we're going to ship it overnight FedEx to your door, which I'm super excited about. I haven't really told anybody about that, but I'm getting excited. Wow. We're in the works, and it's getting a little closer. So yeah, that's my jam, is selling meat, local meat. And we can get into my background, but I think we want to talk about how we met, which is, I kind of have a funny story I want to share about how I met you too.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And I don't know if maybe it's because I don't have a headset in, but I don't know if you could speak up just a smidgy bit, that would help me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, what's your funny story?
Oh, well, so I was thinking about how we met and how, when I started my business in 2016, it was like the height of, I'm going to put my other one in. Maybe you can hear me better now. Is it louder?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's because I don't have a headset. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. So it was the height of the vegan movement. And I remember you walking by and you were really fit and thin and kind of glowing. And I was thinking, wow, you were stunning. And then you came to buy meat from me. And then you told me about your business, and I looked at your business online, and you did yoga. And I was thinking at the time, I didn't know anybody who did yoga that ate meat. And one of my backgrounds is I'm a former vegetarian and a dietetics major. So, I transitioned through thinking vegetarianism was the healthiest way to live, and finding out for me, it's definitely not. And then going into eating meat and really understanding the nutrient requirements of the human body and how you could possibly get those through food, and how hard that was to do if you weren't eating animal products, specifically red meat or meat, depending on your genetics. But you got that. And I was like, I hadn't met somebody who understood that the nutrient density of meat and how valuable it was. And that was just how I was kind of thinking about when we first met. And then, of course, we always have these long conversations at the end of the market, because you didn't share your background entirely yet, which you need to do. But I was fascinated just by what your knowledge is and your background is.
Yeah. So I started out as a medical anthropologist. So what is that? So anthropology is the study of humans. So it's primarily the study of living human cultures. So we studied it was like a wide range of topics, right? And then I niched into medical anthropology, which is the study of the fact that we live in bodies that get old and get sick and die, or can be healthy. And we studied anything from shamanism to biotech. We studied the politics of science and the politics of medicine, and how certain truths get bought and paid for by different industries versus independent science. We looked at the impact of the modern industrial society on indigenous communities, and how these communities would live in, according to, their ancestral diets and lifestyles. And then when they started adopting, these modern, industrial lifestyles, they started not only developing our physical ailments, but they developed our mental illnesses too, and still do to this day. And it's even, I have trouble with the fact that in our language, in English, we talk about mental and physical health like they're separate, like you have to specify, when really your health is mental and physical. If you feel bad emotionally, there's something wrong physically. And if you feel bad physically, it's going to impact your emotions and the lens through which you see reality. And that's something I really want to get out to the world. And I had this epiphany that this happened just before my mom was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. I had this epiphany that we're so mentally and physically ill because we're living in a way that doesn't work with our evolutionary biology. Because I was looking at these people, they were living in a way that worked with how we evolved to live. They would change that, and then they would get sick. And the data, it's indisputable, right? And so then when my mom was diagnosed with, Crohn's disease, and they're like, oh, you have to have a colectomy. They were going to take her colon out and, make her have a colostomy bag the rest of her life. I was like, no, not my mom, not my mom. And back then I didn't do what I do now yet. I was an academic, but I went into research mode. But where I found the solutions wasn't in academia. It was in traditional medicine, Chinese medicine, and also books written by two people who healed themselves of Crohn's disease. And I was like, this is sitting in a health food store shelf, and no one in medical schools, no one in research universities is even looking or asking or interviewing or researching what these people did, figuring out what they did so they can replicate it. Why? You can't patent what they did. They changed their lifestyle. They worked on their mindset. They basically went back to an ancestral lifestyle, and that's what healed them. So that changed my life. And moving forward after that, I was in this joint program with UC Berkeley and UCSF Medical School. I was a Jacob K. Javits Fellow, had all these academic ambitions. And I was just like, I got to get out of this. I got to do something different. I need to help people. And once we got my mom in remission, she's been quiescent from Crohn's since 2004. She's 83 now. She's never had a relapse, still has her colon on 0 immunosuppressant drugs the whole time, ever since we got her off and got her quiescent. So that just changed my life. I was just like, I have to do something. I have to help people. I have to get messages out there. And my dad was a psychiatrist. And so I grew up working in his office. I was immersed in the mental health world. I was immersed in the medical world. I saw behind the kimono of our medical system, and I saw the good things, but I saw the shortcomings. And then this was confirmed in my medical anthropology studies at UCSF and UC Berkeley. And eventually, it just started all congealing. And but when I was 19, I had my first panic attack. And back then they would tell you if you had, any mental health struggle, that it was a genetic chemical imbalance and you would just have to be on medications the rest of your life. And that felt like a life sentence. And I was like, no, I'm not going to accept that as my reality. And so I went on this voyage, merging anthropology, biology, and started just really exploring, trying to figure out, how can I get out of this? How can I stop being a prisoner of this anxiety that's so consuming? And I eventually got into functional medicine and was more of a generalist. I'm good at helping people with guts, with autoimmunity, with definitely mental health issues, weight loss, blah, blah, all this stuff, using all this evolutionary biology context, right? And so I was more of a generalist. And then at some point I was actually meditating one day, and something in me was like, you can't just be a generalist. You need to niche down, right? And I was like, I don't know. And I was just like, okay, higher self, intuition, universe, Godiverse, whatever you want to call it. Tell me what I need to do, show me what I need to do. And within hours, I was just had this full on tingles everywhere. I sound so new age. I got a download, but I did. I just suddenly, everything in me knew I had to help people with chronic anxiety, at least starting there. But anxiety is just a smoke alarm. It's just telling us something else is wrong. So I realized that we need to help, anxiety is a doorway to help people realize, a lot of the people, turns out they have anxiety because of autoimmunity, because of gut issues, because of blood sugar issues, because of hormone issues, so all the things I was helping people with, and I just noticed that I would help people with, their other so-called physical ailments, and their anxiety and usually depression too would go away. And so, but a lot of people don't know they have autoimmunity, or they don't know they have toxic mold, or that their metal fillings are causing their panic attacks. So I realized anxiety is like a smoke alarm telling us something's off, and we need to listen. And one of the things the smoke alarm is nutritional imbalances that cause and all illnesses are a chemical imbalance. Diabetes is a chemical imbalance because insulin and glucose are chemicals. We're made of chemicals. So there's no illness that isn't some kind of chemical imbalance, right? So I just want to flip on our head how we're looking at mental health. And I think the world nutrition is one of the pillars. I do mind body reprogramming kind of stuff, where we work on the nervous system and the stress response, and we do a lot of this functional medicine approach. But what is core is lifestyle nutrition, circadian rhythm, sleep, all the stuff that's becoming hip now, that I'm so excited about. I used to be the freak. And now it's it's hip and cool. So anyway, nutrition, huge piece.
Yeah.
It's a huge piece of the puzzle.
I want to say about that because there's a couple things I want to say, but I think that's great that you've tackled anxiety. That seems like its own little epidemic going on right now. And I've suffered from anxiety. I definitely feel like I've come around to a better way of dealing with it, but I still suffer with anxiety. And me and you actually have that in common in terms of like starting off in academia, you know, like I was full blown dietetics, low fat, butter's gonna kill you, give you a heart attack. I was the worst person to eat with. Like if you had any fat on your plate, I was gonna call you out and to like, let you know that you're gonna have a heart attack from eating that. You know, like that's how I was indoctrinated, I guess, in that system. And then I don't know. Oh, I was really into the chemistry of foods, and I got a book called Know Your Fats, and it's by the like what Mary Enig. She's one of the leading like fat researchers in the country. She's passed away by now, but she was a Weston A. Price person.
Mm-hmm.
So Weston A. Price was a dentist who went around the world studying cultures that hadn't been exposed to modern foods. Well, a lot of them were divided. So it was like maybe there were some people by the coast that traded and ate modern foods, or it was the second generation eating modern foods. And he compared the same people. They did what he did with Hawaiians, with people in Africa, I think Alaska. He went around the world to various
Europe,
places
yeah.
and finding, he was really just looking at teeth, but what he found was so much more, right? So I got a hold of that information, which really kind of elevated a lot of these animal foods as like nutrient dense, essential, for having essential nutrients that were super important for the development of your body, for your immune system, and all these things. So I got a hold of that information, and then at the same time was reading like Marion Nestle, and she does food politics stuff, right? So figuring out how industry connects with our regulations and what the government suggests that we eat. But I had that same aha, like, wait, I need to do something to help people, right? And then I went through my transition of trying to be a vegetarian and realized that the only way I was going to help people was to actually like boots on the ground. I'm going to have to feed people because as a dietitian, I'm going to have to tell them to eat low fat. And then I no longer believed that that was good for them. You know, like you can serve pancakes to a diabetic patient in a hospital, and as long as you give them the right amount of insulin, that's acceptable, right? So and so we both kind of transitioned into like starting our own businesses that were going to somehow tackle these problems, right, through nutrition. And for you, it encompasses the mental health aspect. So we want to talk about the mental health aspect in connection to meat.
Oh, yeah, we do. And can I just really quickly, is it okay? Like, I hope this is, I think you're pretty open about this, but didn't you end up anemic, like when you were vegetarian?
Oh, yes. Let me tell you about that. Yeah, so I was an athlete too. I ran track for UH. And so when you're an athlete, you have a much higher requirement of nutrients, and you deplete those really fast if you don't get enough. You know, you can have, you have stores in your body. And so you can feel great when you change your diet for a little while. And then as soon as you start depleting those nutrients, then you really start feeling it. So for me, it took about a semester in college, and I had a few different things happening. My hair was falling out. I was having a really hard time concentrating on my studies. I couldn't remember things, and I had zero energy, but in a way that I was just like absolutely fatigued. I wasn't just tired. I was like, I just felt like just to lift my arm was so hard, you know. And this is like,
Right.
I was a full-time athlete, I was a full-time student, and I had 2 jobs. So this was really hard for me. And at the same time, as a dietetics major, you know, had been a vegetarian for like a semester. And I talked to one of my professors, and she suggested I get my iron checked. And sure enough, I was low on iron. Well, then I'm like, well, I'm not going to eat meat because meat is bad for you. And I don't think at the time the dialogue was so much about the environment, but I really was concerned about animal welfare. And so I knew the terrible conditions of factory farming, and I did not want to eat any animals that were treated like that. So, and so I was taking heme irons. I was taking iron supplements. That didn't help. So then I started taking heme iron supplements, which are more potent, but they're also like, the side effects from that is like heavy constipation. And then I got zinc deficient because the receptors for iron are the same receptors for zinc. So if you overload your receptors with one nutrient, you can't get in the other nutrient, right? So through that journey, I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to eat meat, you know? And so I started eating just like small amounts of red meat because I knew the nutrient density was going to be higher in red meat for iron specifically. So I was eating just like 1 steak a week. And then it was started feeling a little bit better, and it was so much better than supplementing. And mind you, before this, I tried doing all the vegetarian iron sources, you know, eating tons of spinach and all the things that I was supposed to do to get iron from plants. But as we know, the bioavailability of iron in plants is really low. It wasn't enough for me. I had already depleted my stores. One of my professors was telling me, like, it can take up to a year to get your iron stores back after you've depleted them. And it really did take me almost like a year to level off. And so the course of trying to figure out how I was I just came to terms with the fact that to feel good, I was gonna need to eat red meat, and then trying to figure out where I could get like a good source of red meat from an animal that was raised properly. And that's kind of been the start of this journey of me figuring out like meat sources. And that was when I was like 18, I think, or no, I was like probably like 20, 21. Yeah. There was another thing I wanted to mention about that. Oh, so one of the things we did in one of my last courses before I changed my major, because I went 4 years dietetics major, and I was like, screw this, I'm not on board with the way we're telling people to eat. And I went into business, but we had to do one of our upper division classes. We had to analyze our diet after a month and look at all the nutrients, we averaged all the nutrients that we're getting and compared to them what the requirements were. And I was low in iron still, even though I was eating meat. I wasn't eating a lot, but I was still low in iron based on like just the basic needs, not even like what I needed as an athlete. And then some of the other nutrients that were found primarily in animal foods. So that was really eye-opening to me to understand, you know, what your body's needs are and how to meet them when you really have to dissect that. And that's based on like food tables that are outdated with like back when foods were more nutrient dense because we had healthier soils. So probably what I was analyzing was even less than what I was getting. So it was a huge aha moment for me, and it really made me accept and love red meat. And this was 20 years ago. So
Right.
nobody was on
before
board
the paleo movement
like
and all that.
4 years ago. So I'm like sitting here just like quietly, secretly loving red meat, you know, knowing that it's healthy. And now everybody's starting to get on board with it. So I'm like, thank God.
Except for
But
everybody maybe in our bubble, but like I
yeah,
still get so many people who have been told it's not. And something I just want to caveat really quick. So the point of this isn't actually to trash vegetarians or vegans or say you can't have that as a life choice. No. I think what we're trying to do is like give people more information so that they can pick their proteins according to their own biology, their own ethos, their own, you know, like for example, digestive capacity. There are so many people now because of what we've done to our microbiome, because of all the antibiotics, the stress, the crap we've eaten, the inflammation in our gut, it's getting harder and harder to digest legumes or like soy, like tofu or tempeh. Tempeh is easier than tofu in some ways, but so I'm not saying don't eat those foods, but like I get people with autoimmunity and it's like really hard on their system, or people with gut issues or all kinds of things. And they have a really hard time converting the plant proteins, amino acids to like what their body needs, or they're having trouble with digesting it. And it's gotten to the point there's almost like shaming people for eating meat. But then we could shame people. I don't want to shame people for being vegetarian or vegan either. I want to stop the shame. Like
vegetarians.
Yeah,
I have
like
friends who do great as vegans. I have friends, well, I wouldn't say I see too many people long-term doing great as vegans, but I definitely have friends that do great as vegetarians, and your genetics play such a big role in that.
Right.
I clearly have like Viking genetics that require a lot of.
I think I have Viking, some kind of Nordic white person, like you had to survive in the winter where nothing was alive kind of genetics. I think people maybe from the tropics genetically might do better on more, you know, they can. So that's the thing I want to say about nature. Like one of the things I always say, I brand it as inner genius health, because I realize like nature, the more you learn about nature, it's like nature's genius. The intelligence of nature blows my mind. I've been just watching this podcast that Mighty B, who's joined us today, gave to me, sent my way. And it's, oh my gosh, like it's just like the more you learn about what we are and how we're made and how we evolved and how we're designed, it's like we are genius. Like our nature, we are nature. Like our biology is genius. And so nature's not like, nature has the intelligence to like, there's a variety of humans with a variety of genetics that can survive in a variety of environments. So some people are optimized more for like, you know, handling animal products more. Other people like are optimized more for plant proteins. And so there's this variety, just like there's a variety of ethnicities and a variety of, you know, there's a variety of biologies, and something I call bio-individuality. We're all bio-individual. And so to decide that there's this one way of eating that everyone's supposed to do, otherwise, you know, you're some kind of sinner or bad person, like that's so divisive, and it's inhumane, and it goes against the principles of nature.
that's a great thing to say about that, because I do sometimes, as a meat advocate, I think sometimes people think I am that pro meat, but I definitely am more about intuitive eating and eating for what feels right for you, like really listening to your body, like that doesn't feel right, that does feel right. Because I actually eat a ton of, I eat vegetarian often, and then I also eat meat a lot sometimes, but I do it based on what my body's kind of calling for. And
Yeah.
I mostly, when I post my Instagram story, people see me cooking, and I usually use my meat. But if you don't see my stories cooking, it's probably because I'm eating like mostly vegetarian stuff. So I'm
Yeah.
definitely not one-sided, and I don't believe in having a diet that fits one. It just a
Right.
one size fits all diet.
Yeah, dietary dogma. One thing I do believe, I will say, is I feel like we do need to eat real food and
Yes,
food that eats
it's the only thing
works
I
with our
think
evolutionary
that.
biology. But there's so much wiggle room within that. I like the word
Hmm.
wiggle.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were going to talk about, and I think we're going to circle back to this a little more later, but I just wanted to get that out right off the top, that we're not, we're wanting to like stop the madness. Like, let's open up a dialogue where there's space for everybody. It doesn't have to be either or, it can be and we'll get more to that later. But one of the reasons I proposed, I was like, Jess, we've got to do a live, and I want to talk about how mental health and meat or nutrition and the role of meat are important. One of the things that chaps my hide, one of the things that just annoys me is like all these studies that people are citing saying that meat causes cardiovascular disease or is bad for your health or whatever. It's like there are these studies where they put people, in the studies they were eating like Oscar Mayer wieners and like fast food, and like there's almost no differentiation
Yeah.
between the kind of meat you sell, where it's either wild game, free animals like living in their well, venison isn't really, it was brought here, it's an invasive species, but well, that's a whole other topic. But the point is, like, they're living outside, they're in the sunshine. I try to eat animals that got to live outside and in like either not in captivity, or they were maybe under the illusion that they were in captivity. They got to have fresh air and sunshine and a diet that works with their biology, right? So that's what and seafood too. Like, I don't eat farm fish or farm seafood. I try my very best to avoid all factory farm, whatever. That's my personal choice, because of environmental reasons, because of health reasons, and because of consideration for these creatures that we're part of a food chain. But if we're taking their life for our nourishment, I feel like they should have a damn good life first. And so before they,
Yeah, one
become
bad day.
our food. Anyway, so that's one thing that just annoys me, is like this lack of differentiation. Like, you can't even talk about all tomatoes. Like a slice of a tomato on a hamburger at McDonald's was grown in depleted, poisoned soil, has very low nutrients, not very good flavor. And then, like, my friends in Waimanalo who have organic farms and grow tomatoes, I mean, it's like a whole other thing. You can't compare the two things on a molecular
No.
level. They're not the same. Same goes for meat. You take factory farm fish or meat or any animal product that's factory farm, cheese, dairy, butter, like whatever, just anything that came from an animal, factory farm, and anything that came from an animal that's pastured or wild game, and on a molecular level, the hormonal impact, the impact on your microbiome, on the microbes of your gut, the impact on your neurotransmitters, the nutritional value. Like, when you have a super stressed out animal, you're going to get those stress hormones. When you have an animal that's in a crowded factory farm, that's like there's so much poop everywhere that they're fogging with these insecticides and vermicides to kill all the maggots in the poop, and then these animals breathe it in, and where does it get stored? In their tissues that you eat. you
Yes.
know it's
You,
disgusting.
I have a theory too about, how I don't believe in a lot of the way in the epidemiology studies. For it's mostly food questionnaires, people having to, like, say what they recall what they ate, which is really it just has so many issues with it. And then, as you know, like, we have such varied diets, so it's really hard to pick apart one food group and say that this is what's causing this thing. And actually, none of them show causation, they show correlation. And then, the media gets a hold of them and then says red meat causes cancer, or
Right.
and
Right. Yeah.
none of
Because
this
how
has
do you know
been
these people are
proven.
eating? Like, the China
Yeah.
study was like, oh,
Yeah.
well, look, we eat more fat in the United States than in China, so it must be because of the meat. Therefore, we should all be vegan. And
Yeah.
I'm like, Chinese people are not vegan. I'm
No, they eat a
sorry.
ton of pork. I the way I see, like, these food studies when they come out, and the book Big Fat Surprise did a really good job of really dissecting all the studies done that damn saturated fat and cholesterol. So if anybody's interested in really going in depth with that and learning more about the history and where exactly what these studies, how these studies were done and, where they fail, Big Fat Surprise, she dissected those really, really well. But the way I see it is like you really can't isolate a single food or a food group based on these population studies anyways.
Yeah.
And then when you talk about the difference between processed food and real food and factory farm and properly raised meat from properly raised livestock, I mean, there's a huge difference. And one thing I think about with what you're talking about, like you can't get health from a sick animals, is like as humans, animals, a lot of the toxins are stored in the fat, correct?
Right.
We're storing a lot of toxins
and brain
in fat.
and liver and heart. Yeah.
So
Fat. Yeah.
So the fat is the main storage for the liver detoxes, right? So sometimes people think the liver's got a bunch of toxins. It doesn't. But
that's not how it
the
works.
fat is the storage for these toxins. And when you have these animals in toxic environments where, for example, it's legal to feed cattle byproducts of the candy industry, so they're eating M&Ms along with all the other crap they're giving them, So that's where, the way I was raised to believe with the like typical dietetics, like Western dietetics, is like fat's bad for you. I'm like, well, maybe it is if you're eating from factory farm.
If you're eating canola oil and margarine and factory farm meat,
But really, when there's definitely got to be something different. You can even taste. I have a pretty good palate for this, but you can taste the difference in an animal that struggled compared to one that didn't. And I know this because I've hunted and I've eaten animals that were, the deer specifically, that were hunted and stressed out before they were killed, compared to like the way Maui Nui harvests. They don't even see it coming. It's like at night. They have military grade night vision. It's a perfect headshot. It has to be for them to get the USDA certification. And that meat to me has a distinct different taste because it doesn't have the stress hormones in it. So, and that's right, just when you're really sensitive to it. But I totally agree that, I see a lot of people in the carnivore movement, like, saying it doesn't matter as long as it's, you're just getting rid of everything but meat and we've gotten healthy, and look at these people that have gotten healthy. But I worry about the long-term consequences of any kind of toxin that you're loading your body with every day.
Right. Yeah. This is something you just touched on a point. I actually had a conversation with this awesome, actually a PA, physician assistant yesterday, who's a very out of the box, open-minded thinker. And we were talking about how his medical training, all conventional medical training, focuses so much on your BMI, on your weight, on your, your cholesterol, and like all these markers that aren't necessarily predictive of if you're going to have an autoimmune disease, if you're going to be like disabled, if you're going to have cancer, if you're going to, if you're going to have Alzheimer's or dementia. One of the things that I just see over and over again, people with chronic anxiety and mental health issues, and then a lot of other chronic illness that goes with it, because if you have anxiety or mental health issues, you don't just have a mental health issue, you have a physical health problem. And so it's all, we address all of it. We don't just say, we're going to get your anxiety to go away, but you can keep all your other ailments. So one of the things, I run advanced hormone tests, but I also run something called a total tox panel. And I look at their total toxic burden. I also do advanced gut testing. And what I find is their microbiomes are not very diverse. They have inflammation in their gut, way out of balance in their bacteria. And then they're loaded with mold toxins, heavy metals, and environmental toxins, like compared to other people. I've had people tested where they don't, for other things, they don't come back as loaded up.
Are you finding that in people with anxiety?
Yeah, people think their urine and their stool samples. So like we run these labs and I get to see what's inside of people. And it's real, like it's in us, if we don't get it out, if we don't stop putting it in and we don't get it out, it's in us. And the thing is, they're not only endocrine disruptors, meaning they screw up our hormones, they screw up our neurotransmitters, like our brain chemistry, our serotonin, or dopamine, or GABA, or it goes on and on. We have a lot of chemicals. And it causes neuroinflammation, which is inflammation of not just the brain, but the brain and the nervous system. So, and then that triggers, there's so much research showing that inflammation in the brain and like toxins in the brain cause not only anxiety and depression, that's your early warning signals. Eventually it can turn into MS, it can turn into Alzheimer's, it can turn into it used to be called Lou Gehrig's. It's not anymore. Might be, what am I thinking of? Anyway, like all these neurodegenerative diseases. And so like it's not just like if you're having anxiety or depression, that's your body trying to get your attention that something's off. So there are different
It's
things
like
that
the
cause it. Sometimes
canary in the
stress.
coal mine.
It's the canary in the coal mine. So here's the deal. Why did I want to bring up mental health and meat? A couple angles. There are three angles, right? One is if you're eating contaminated meat from a stressed out, tortured animal, I call that karma. Like if you support and you eat and you consume something that is destroying the environment, that's disrespecting this animal and torturing it, and supporting all these chemical industries, like, that are poisoning us and the earth and whatever and causing chronic disease, it makes you sick. It makes you sick. And it not only physically ill, but mentally ill, because again, it's all the same, right? So like I'm seeing these people, we've got to stop eating factory farm meat for mental health too, not just physical health, for mental health. Another angle with the mental health thing is the nutrient profile of the kind of meat you sell versus like a just conventional meat. Like it's completely different. And if you look at mental health issues, I also do mineral tests on people, and I look at nutrient deficiencies in people if it feels necessary. Sometimes I just don't need to look test, we just fix the problem. But it's like you find these people are low in zinc, they're low in amino acids, they're low in, like, you can also run organic acids tests. And like you look at the labs on these people, and these people are deficient in the very nutrients, B vitamins, the very nutrients that are found in high quality meats that aren't as present or available. Also the good fats, the omega-3s. Like you get an animal that was outdoors in the sunshine eating grass, like being part of the whole photosynthesis cycle, being part of balanced circadian rhythms, that animal is going to make its body fat. It will have less fat because it'll be a more fit animal because it ate salad, not cereal. But but that animal's fat will be so much higher in omega-3s and omega-6s, making it anti-inflammatory. So the fat from the meat you sell is actually anti-inflammatory. It is heart friendly. It actually, because we don't get heart disease because of saturated fat and all that stuff. It's inflammation of the lining of the arteries. What causes inflammation of the lining of the arteries? These these seed oils, these like canola oil, cottonseed oil, corn oil, these refined vegetable oils, sugars, all these toxic chemicals that are in our processed food, that are in the environment. And of course, we avoid what we can and then try not to stress about what you can't control, or you can drive yourself crazy. But it's just like we're getting heart disease from inflammation.
Yeah.
We're not. It's not from eating grass-fed butter. I'm sorry.
Really,
like that's so what
no.
people have a hard time understanding, and I don't blame them. I'm almost off my rant. I don't blame people for feeling this way because we're being told this from every angle, right?
Yeah.
Like we're told that, if you want to avoid a heart attack, then you want to have really low cholesterol, which by the way, that will cause Alzheimer's and all kinds of neurodegenerative dementia, MS, all this other stuff. You're supposed to have really low cholesterol. And then you're supposed to like not even eat fat, which maybe if you're eating factory farm meat, maybe you shouldn't eat the fat because it's so toxic. But
I kind of feel a little bit like that. But you need to, you got to meet your.
Yeah, I really would prefer people just not support those industries if they can. Now there's a socioeconomic angle here that's a whole other follow up.
Yes, yeah.
But so anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is if you want to be heart healthy, you want to prevent a heart attack, then you've got to be aware of the quality of animal products you're eating. And if you're not eating animal products, you've got to make sure that you're finding forms of protein where you're getting all those micronutrients and all those minerals and all the B vitamins and all the proteins and all the amino acids in a way you can digest that's not damaging your gut, which you and your genetics might be able to do. But you've got to make sure you do that, or else you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, and the best way to find that out is by testing. You can find out, like, as the stuff that you do where you're testing to find out. But yeah, I'll also add that, the integrity of our arteries and all the cells in our body require the nutrients found in animal foods.
Collagen.
It's one of the reasons collagen has gotten so popular. And it's not just collagen. I mean, there's so many other components that come from
for
the
bones
cuts and the bones. And this is why and this as a anthropologist, if you consider yourself that, but every culture in the world valued bones and broth. It's across the board. Every culture that ever existed in the world has utilized the whole animal until the modern diet,
like muscle meat, only muscle meat.
And that's why I'm so you're really passionate about this because you've seen the effects of it on people, and I'm really passionate because I've personally experienced it.
And I personally experienced it too, by the way. But anyway,
and I will share my story with regards to mental health. I have for whatever reason, reasons, you know, knowing I've studied, you know, iron and some of these nutrients pretty extensively to try and figure out why I tend to have low iron and struggle with anemia, even when I do eat what would some people would consider a fair amount of like really iron rich sources of foods, especially red meat. But the only way I've been able to get my iron levels stable, and I'm still kind of dissecting this, is through eating the organs, and it's like totally changed my life. I definitely acknowledge that I probably have a higher requirement for a lot of these nutrients. I had a professor in college, my dietetics professor, who had actually gotten scurvy, and she told us this story as an example that genetically everyone is different and has different requirements. And she literally got scurvy even though she was consuming some vitamin C stuff. She just has a really high requirement. So she gave this example of like how people can have super high requirements of certain vitamins and minerals. And actually humans used to not even require vitamin C. This is something we evolved to require because we got it so prevalently in our food source that we kind of evolved to need it. But they've looked at, I guess, records. You could probably describe this better, but they know that in the past, like original humans didn't require vitamin C. They could make it, you know, and we make different minerals and vitamins that we need from other things in our body. But yeah, with regards to the mental health aspect, I've also kind of always had like kind of ups and downs with depression. And I think a lot of people probably experience this, and it's like kind of come and go and just stuff that I kind of got used to working through. And then, you know, the liver was really important to me when I was pregnant. I read Lily Nichols' book, Real Food for Pregnancy, and I realized what a wonderful source of nutrition this was. And I knew this from studying nutrition in college, because when you study each nutrient, you get a list of the foods that are that have the highest amount. And at the top of majority of the nutrients is liver as like the highest level. And it's usually through the roof, like has so much more B vitamins, iron, zinc, choline, vitamin A, all these things. And so I knew that was like a really great food source. But of course, I'm like, I'm never going to eat liver. Are you kidding me? But Lily Nichols explained the importance of it. Same thing across the board culturally. Women were always given organ meats when they were pregnant. And so I started including that. It was really hard for me to eat because I didn't like the taste of it, but I was kind of forcing it down. Had a great pregnancy, felt great, had tons of energy. And then I figured out like, well, people aren't going to just want to always eat liver. So we've created this organ blend where it's like ground beef with the organs mixed in it. And ever since I've like consistently had that in my diet, ever since I started that product, I have not had those waves of depression. And this has been well over a year. I think it might be going on. How long have I had that? Well over a year. You know, like I've felt really stable mood in the kind of the depression end. And I've had a lot of customers tell me about that too. And I remember this one family was like, yeah, like overall our whole family just is like better mood, you know, and like, you know, a lot of the B vitamins are associated with depression. I mean, there's, you know, there's really clear studies on vegans having more deficiencies, and these deficiencies associated with higher rates of depression or poor mood and behavioral issues. And this is because they're required for the neurotransmitters and synthesis and, you know, our hormones that you
And
probably speak on that even more.
detoxification, like getting the garbage out also. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was just kind of one thing I wanted to share in terms of not just meat for mental health, but those organs for me and a lot of my customers have really made a big difference in our mood. And it's just because the nutrients in them are really high and they're really bioavailable and they support your mental health. I mean, it's a pretty clear connection, I think. And a lot of people don't realize that. I think it's not common knowledge to think that eating something like organs can help you with your depression.
Right. Well, that's like one of the things another thing I'm on a mission to get out to more part of the larger mission is that it's like we see the world through a chemical lens. It's like, and well, it's chemicals, it's molecules, it's atoms, it's energy, it's frequency, it's whatever. We talk about people having good or bad energy or good or bad vibes or whatever, because we really are made of that. And it's interesting how it's kind of gets shamed because it can be too new age sounding and not science enough or whatever. But it's like, if you look at advanced science studies, this is all real, right? And I experienced this. One of the things that really also inspired me to really help people with anxiety is because I lived in a house I was aware there was a roof leak and some mold issues, but there was peeling paint. The property manager landlord refused to do anything about it. I got severe lead poisoning. It literally almost killed me. My organ systems were shutting down. It was horrendously traumatic, and it was recent, actually. It happened in the last couple of years. And the first symptoms I was getting were anxiety. Like anxiety was the first, and I had I was meditating 2 hours a day. I was doing CrossFit. I was doing Pilates. I was exercising. I was hiking. I was swimming in the ocean. I was eating a perfect diet. I was doing all the things, getting enough sleep. Like, oh my God, I was like a lifestyle saint. And I was I was a mess. Like that's what I want people to understand. Like, even if you have a perfect lifestyle, if you have like these hidden environmental exposures and stuff, you can still get very, very sick, so and that's why I say a lot of the positive thinking things. I'm like, I'm sorry, if you have lead poisoning, like it's really hard. You can't outthink that. You can't positive that. If you have nutrient deficiencies and mineral deficiencies, or you're not able to extract the nutrients you need from the food you're eating, you have gut issues even, you're going to see the world. You're not going to make enough serotonin. You're not going to make enough dopamine. You're going to have inflammation in your brain and nervous system. Your body's going to be like really struggling. And then the way you feel about the people and circumstances around you will be seen through this filter. Think of like a hall of mirrors where, there might be a mirror where you really like how you look in that mirror, but there might be another mirror that's kind of distorted and horrifying. And what ends up happening when we're nutritionally imbalanced, when we don't like what's happening with your clients are eating your organ blends and they're noticing they feel better and everyone's in a better mood, that's real, because we see the world through a molecular, chemical, energetic lens that is shaped by our environmental exposures, that's shaped by our, diet and lifestyle, that's shaped by our movement, that's shaped by our thoughts, our daily thoughts and actions, our beliefs, that's shaped by, what we're breathing in the air. I mean, it's just like, we're being created by this stuff. And so when we can optimize the way we're living, the way we're thinking, get the garbage out, get the good stuff in, and really support our biology in the way we evolve to live to the best of our ability in the constraints of the modern world without completely like being at odds with the whole world around you, right? Like what ends up shifting in people is amazing. And not only is their health getting better and their mood's getting better, but then your thinking gets clearer, and then you become a better business person, you become a better entrepreneur, you make more money, you like everything gets better, you're happier, you're healthier, you have better relationships, better friendships, you start attracting people into your life starts feeling like magic, right? And when I see people, I love the mental health world. I love all the mind body stuff. I love that. I teach it. I support it. But you can't outthink. You can't positive think or positive vibes only over an imbalanced nutrition or over toxic exposure, being poisoned by your own food or being malnourished by your own food.
Yeah. And I think that's such a good, like holistic view of not just the mental, physical health, because I guess we should just call it health.
Health. Yeah.
Health. But I know we also wanted to touch on this kind of one-sided diet of like veganism and carnivore, and then bring it back to a center of like, we just need to get, as you're saying, we need to get our nutrients. And unfortunately, not everybody has a degree in nutrition to understand what they need to get nutrients, like what foods they need to get for what nutrients and how much. That is such a science, and it's not a perfect science whatsoever. And every person's not expected to know that. But the way I was taught, and even though modern nutrition is not my favorite, I did get some good lessons, but one of them was like, eat a variety of real food. And that variety will offer you all the nutrients you need. And then listening to your body to be able to intuitively know, what, I'm craving red meat right now, or what, I'm craving a lot of salad, and maybe you need more folate, or maybe you need more iron. And so it's a combination of foods that meet your needs. It's not a crazy psycho diet that's gonna like solve all your health problems, right? And so I'm waiting, and I'm just hoping, I'm like, eventually the big diet fad is going to be like balanced, intuitive eating of real food. But it's not super exciting, so I don't know if it's going to get popular on Instagram.
Well, it's funny because I wrote a blog post a while back. It's buried somewhere on my website, but I called it, like, it was talking about like fad diets and like that. No, and it's very tongue in cheek, and it's very cheeky, and it's very like, no, you should be a carnivore because of this, and you should be paleo because of this. No, you should be a vegan because of this, and like it's just kind of mocking the whole thing. And I was like, but wait, now I have the greatest diet there's ever been. It's called a low fad diet. We've got to knock it off. We're,
No
you know,
fads. Like
low
I'm really
fat
into the
diet. Yeah.
yeah, I'm really into
So,
the old school, just like protein, vegetable
yeah.
starch. That's like
Yeah,
I like.
you know
But
what? You know what? That's actually to this day, I really think that's pretty right on. It's like, and you can kind of, I teach people biometrics. I teach people like using their hands and their palms, like how to measure out their plate.
gauge.
And people are
Hmm.
shocked at how much volume of food they can eat and like feel like, and lose weight. Like often I'll have people eating more
Oh
food,
yeah.
losing weight after they eat food. Calorie restrictions, don't even get me on dieting. Like, don't even let me. But like dieting and calorie restriction, that's like one of the worst things you can do to your body because you'll think you're starving. This is not an urban legend. They're like the mechanisms in the body are known. Your body will think you're starving. It will try to protect you. It will change the body fat set point in your brain, and your body will fight tooth and nail to keep fat on your body. It will slow down your metabolism, make you exhausted. You'll start eating
Hmm.
your own muscle and bone. Like it's horrendous. Like you need to nurture, you need to nourish, you need to it needs to be a balance of nutrients you have and like you said, just eat a little bit of a lot of different things as long as they're good quality and well sourced. I see this whole focus on macros, which is great. Like here's the deal. First I used to think, okay, if you just eat real food and it's good quality and it's all organic and well sourced, then you won't have a problem. But I hit a certain age where like I was doing that, but like I didn't know really much about macros and I was starting to gain some weight and not feel so good. And then that's where I kind of stumbled in. That was kind of my early days of functional medicine. I mean, I wasn't that much older because I'm not so old now, but I stumbled into like learning about the macros. But if you do perfect macros, but you're eating poor quality food, you go on a keto diet and you're eating salad dressing with canola oil, you're going to make yourself sick. So if you get the macros perfect and the food quality is bad, you have a problem. If you get the macros like you get the quality good, but your macros are off, I'd actually rather you do that, have good quality and get the macros off. But if you can do both, then and it's a little, when I work with clients, we tweak it a little bit for different people because some people really can, do well with more carbs. Other people have leptin resistance, and leptin is a hormone that feel full, and they have insulin resistance, they have blood sugar and like cravings issues and weight loss resistance. So then we tweak it to them. So it's like the macros need to be adjusted a little for each person. There are ways you can like test it out on people to see how they feel, and then it helps them figure out what they need to do for them individually. But but here's the deal. Like I love educating people. I love teaching people that if I could say just if you think ancestral, like think food. I mean, I know our ancestors didn't have a Vitamix, okay? But had
Or a
more
lot of
pest.
the modern,
Yeah.
even just the way that our vegetables have evolved and whatnot.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. But here's the deal. If you can just get as close to what you would intuit would be your ancestral lifestyle as possible in terms of ingredient sourcing, and then you listen to your body and you're aware that fat and protein usually make you feel full, non-starchy veggies make you feel full, carbs aren't the devil, carbs are good, we need them, it's just the quality of them and how they interact with your body and where you've gotten yourself. Because people who've overdone the sugar for too long may need to make some adjustments temporarily while they heal their metabolism. Then they can get back and, so-called get away with things they couldn't before and not gain weight. I used to be 50 pounds overweight. Like I lost weight on accident living
Wow.
in Spain because I immersed myself in a culture where I walked everywhere and ate more real food than I ever had. I was also in my 20s, so it was easier. But I accidentally lost 50 pounds after years of dieting that failed on a low fat diet, right? I gained so much weight on a low fat diet.
Me
So,
too. Me too.
yeah.
Totally. I had
So,
struggled with that
yeah.
so much.
So anyway, I really like our intuition. Like I feel like when you have a meditation practice, you're more likely to eat better. Not everybody. There are people
Just
who are
listening to
profound.
yourself more.
Yeah. They're profound meditators who really still struggle with food. I don't want to overgeneralize, but the more you can go in and feel and tap in and be present with yourself, the more your body will guide you. And sometimes we get all these shoulds, like I call it shoulding all over yourself, and I do it too. I have to catch it. Like I shouldn't be doing this, and I should be doing this, and I should be, and I've been getting better about when, I have like a little checklist of when I put a meal together that I teach my clients, but sometimes my body's like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't have to have
Yeah.
mine, you know?
The grace and forgiveness factor of eating has changed my life, my relationship with food. I've struggled with anorexia and bulimia in college as well, kind of after, and it was actually a result of trying to do this hardcore low fat diet and having a lot of sugar and just I was in a glucose roller coaster all the time, just like spiraling out of control and overeating, and then trying to control that and thinking, and unfortunately, what I needed was like fat and protein to feel satiated, so I wasn't overeating like a ton of these whole wheat canola oil cookies that I made because I thought they were healthy for me.
Yeah.
But but what did I want to say about that?
We were talking
Like,
about
oh,
one
yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
We gotta rein ourselves in, but like, I
Yeah.
did want to say that I think there are a lot of tweaks to what you eat that'll like improve your health. So not to say like you just need to do this or you just need to do that, but it's so cool going on that journey. And I love when I ask a lot of my customers like their food journey, because to me the journey of figuring out what to eat to feel your best is really interesting, because people try these fad diets and maybe they learn something about that. Or carnivore has been really interesting to me because I've seen people get super healthy, especially autoimmune disorder people, just eating meat, and I can visibly see them improve their health, and it hasn't been a ton of people. A lot of people, it's not sustainable, but I even tried it and I learned some stuff about what his, like, I was eating a lot of peanut butter because my son and I were doing like banana peanut butter smoothies. And when I took that out of my diet, like so much of my joint pain went away. It was like night and day, and it was not something I would have thought about. I'm just like, I like the taste of this. And it's technically a whole food or, whatever. So there's all these
But
cool tweaks
there are
that,
mold toxins
you
in
know,
peanuts, some more than others, and like some people
totally,
tolerate,
yeah,
some people don't.
totally. And
There's so much.
it can be, but basically, just to finish up that kind of like the food, fat, and the diet thing, like really what we wanted to mention was just how nutrient dense, animal products or meat can be, and how important that can be in your mental health. If that's your thing, like if you're not eating meat and you feel great, right? Yeah, that's fine. You feel great. But this could potentially solve some people's problems that maybe hadn't thought about this, right? Like maybe just try it, experiment. And
I've worked
definitely the quality.
right, and I've worked with a lot of like I have a lot of vegetarians and vegans come work with me, and I don't actually try to talk them out of it. I just say, here are your choices. Here are different ways to look at it. You choose. Often they will end up deciding to add back some animal products. Sometimes it's just eggs and like maybe sheep and goat dairy instead of cow dairy, and maybe they'll like do, or maybe they'll be pescatarians. They'll do some fish and eggs. Sometimes people just are like, what I've noticed is people who are craving meat and they feel guilty because they feel like they're a bad person and they're going to be destroying the earth if they eat any kind of meat whatsoever. And so when I help people understand regenerative agriculture, that you can actually heal land raising animals, there are ways to raise animals that where either you keep intact ecosystems that you're, having wild game, you're actually by like, for example, consuming the venison on Maui, they're an invasive species and the coral is damaged by their overpopulation. So by
In
actually
the
eating the
forest.
venison in the
Yeah.
forest too, and so by eating the venison, we're actually helping save the coral in the forest and the land. We're actually contributing to like we're actually improving an ecosystem, not damaging
Yeah.
it. We're
And
not
even their
causing global
population, like it helps their
right.
population, to keep the numbers in check. Do you want to
Yeah,
talk
because
about that?
because you can like tell me what I'm missing, but like if there's too many of them, there's not enough food. They start starving, and these poor things are skin and bones and languishing and don't have food to eat, and they're starving. And I'd rather get
Yeah.
shot in the head than slowly start to die.
Yeah,
Sorry.
unfortunately, I mean, the balance is super important. And unfortunately, sometimes that means, not everything gets to live. And I had, back when it was the height of like the, the, well, I used to just get a lot of hate, for selling meat from, I don't get it very much anymore. Like a lot of people are super stoked on what I do. But I had one girl say like, why we should just give them birth control. These deer should just get birth control.
So they
That
can
would
have
be
cancer.
more humane. I'm like, good luck with that. You tell me how you're gonna like get birth control to all these animals. But also, why would you do that when, why would you why would you not harvest these animals and consume them when we live on a little tiny island, and protein is the basis of life, right? So we have to get complete proteins to be healthy and have optimal health. If you're not going to eat animal protein from this state, you're going to import some kind of plant protein, because we don't grow any plant, like complete plant proteins here in any kind of volume. I mean, like I actually, looking at it, couldn't find any local food sources that are any kind of commodity crop that we have any amounts of. I mean, maybe you'd have to propose that we start growing these things, but there's the protein sources that are local are animal based, right? So you're going to have your carbon footprint of bringing your stuff over. I mean, a lot of these plant proteins unfortunately come from third world countries that have other issues associated with them as well. But one of my big things is food security in Hawaii, and that's really important. So if we live on this island, we import 90% of our food. Like we are so screwed if things don't start, if the shores decimated by a tsunami. Like, people are going to starve. It's going to be war. It's going to be bad, because they've actually analyzed how the logistics of trying to get food to everybody if our main ports are shut down, and it's going to be worse than Puerto Rico, like times 10. So, but in terms of the regenerative ag, since I was thinking about this, because you mentioned it, and it's like, I think a lot of people haven't gotten a super clear idea of what regenerative agriculture is.
Right.
Do you want me to chat about that?
I want you do that.
Yeah, so
We'll wrap this up in the next few minutes.
We should, yeah. I'm not a farmer, and I have farmed. I've done a lot of aquaculture in most of my farming, but I've also volunteered on farms, and but I have spent a lot of time studying it, and I've talked to a lot of farmers and ranchers. And one thing I've learned about regenerative agriculture is it's super complex. I mean, it is so complex that I can't really describe it very well, but I can give like some general ideas. And there is a really amazing book that describes it in detail if you love science. And I have it, I actually brought it. So it's called For the Love of Soil by Nicole Masters, and she actually consults for regenerative farms. But basically, regenerative agriculture it's a style of farming that imitates nature. And I was first keen on this when I started my business. I only sold venison, antelope, and lamb. You actually, I think, might have met me when I didn't even have beef, because
I did. You had antelope
destroying the planet. Yeah. Because I was convinced cattle were going to destroy the planet. We had all this venison. This is what I wanted to do. But I couldn't make my business work like that, because there was no demand for that meat, like maybe the lamb was like a little popular, but I was talking to a rancher, and he was describing to me his first experience ranching, where he went to work on his uncle's ranch, and they had the ranch right up next to a preserve. And the preserve was like fenced off, and nothing was happening on the preserve because it was fenced off as like a nature preserve. And then they had his ranch, and he said the difference was like night and day. So his ranch was like lush growing grass. There was all kinds of life, different animals, birds, like bugs, all kinds of stuff. And then the other land was just like dead, right? And it's supposed to be this nature preserve. And then
that's the power of food.
Yeah, a lot of things. It's not even just, and that's the thing. I think it's like people get into this idea that it's like, cattle ranching is regenerative agriculture, but you can have regenerative agriculture without animals and have a ton of worms doing the same work. It's really about building the soil and encouraging microbes and carbon stored in the soil. Like the carbon in the soil is kind of like the basis of the soil that holds all the water, and carbon supports everything, right? It supports life on Earth, right? So we're like, oh, the carbon. It's like, we just need the carbon to be in the right places. And that's what it is. It's about not extracting from the soil, but regenerating the soil. It's about the soil, right? And so animals help because they move around the soil, they poop on it, and then they encourage all these microbes. They encourage methane consuming bacteria, which is part of the methane cycle. It's not like animals are just getting rid of this methane. They also have, put carbon into the soil, which also like restores the methane cycle is really complex, but really there's not an issue with animals and methane. I think it's blown out of proportion. And if you really go into the science of methane, you'll see that like we're not adding more methane by the amount of cattle we have. It's a cycle. It's like every 10 years, the methane is like recycled. But yeah, regenerative ag is really like just regenerating the soil. You can do that various ways. And then, so Jack, this guy that told me about his ranch, he drew this little picture for me, and he drew a bunch of little buffalo. And he's like, so back in the day when we had all these buffalo, which PS, we had insane amounts of buffalo, insane amounts of dinosaurs. We had so much more ruminant animals on Earth in the past, in the history of Earth, than we do now, just to add in the whole climate factor of trying to, argue that
blame it on the animals.
Destroying that. But he drew a bunch of little buffalo, and he drew some like coyotes or wolves or something around the buffalo, and how those predators would kind of keep those animals in a mob or a herd, and then they kind of chomp everything in this tight mob, dig up the soil, poop, and then they move on to the next spot, right? And that they were herding animals, and that was kind of their natural nature. And they describe, like Lewis and Clark's history describes going through seas of buffalo, like having to wait like 2 days for these buffalo to pass. There's so many buffalo in the United States, and grass being up to their heads. So the landscape look totally different. But the idea of regenerative ag, if you're going to do like holistic grazing for cattle ranching, is to mimic that mob grazing. So they use it. There's a lot of fencing going. It's pretty expensive for the rancher actually, and it's one of the reasons like grass-fed beef can be more, is like the fencing situation is very expensive. For if you ever talk to a rancher, they're just like, to do regenerative ag, they have to use a lot of fencing, because traditionally they've just allowed cattle to graze, and this has been what's kind of decimated a lot of the land in Hawaii, is that, you know, we let these cattle be unchecked without predators, and grazing can destroy the land. And that's what's happening with the venison too, right? With the deer too. It's like we've had a lot of destruction from these animals, but if you get them more in tune with nature in a regenerative fashion, then you cannot really utilize them, and it does the opposite. It's going to bring the life of the land up. Like more species are going to be around because there's life in the soil, and that life in the soil is going to create some birds to come around, and that's going to create some predators for those guys or whatever. And it's a balance. So I mean, that's kind of the perfect system. And I'm sure somebody would correct me on some of that stuff that I'm saying wrong. But one of the things that it does, when you are using animal agriculture, or even if you're doing plant agriculture, with regenerative agriculture, you're going to be not tilling the soil. So every time you dig up soil, it releases carbon into the atmosphere. And so a lot of regenerative ag will include no tilling methods if you're doing like plant agriculture.
Yeah.
And
John Deere now make machines now that don't till. They put they're like these little seed pokers, and they don't.
Yeah, there's another way to, there's like ways to do rotational grazing with like perennial crops or annual crops. Generally, you want to get the deepest roots you can, because if you can get like 30-foot deep roots on like a perennial grass, you're going to store so much carbon. Right. And you can compare that to like, we're going to plant trees to get the carbon out of the atmosphere. Like, guess what happens to those trees in a wildfire? Like, carbon back in the atmosphere. When you store it in the soil, you're putting so much more carbon back in the soil, and it has the potential to remove so much of this carbon from the atmosphere that people are so worried about, right? So
yeah, that documentary, Kiss the Ground, that was such a good, everything you're talking about. So if you guys don't feel like reading a whole book, the books sound great, but if you want to just go watch it on Netflix, go watch Kiss the Ground, because all this stuff is in more detail. Like it's what she's saying is so right on. This is a huge big deal. Yeah.
And now they have really good studies that have measured this, you know, like there's this guy, Jason Roundtree, I think he's with Michigan State University, and they've done a lot of studies on like white oat pastures. I think they've done it on
I love those guys.
On his ranch. And there's various people like finally showing this, you know, but it's just a lot of it's being ignored because of the, you know, the agenda for the processed food industry and big pharma and whatnot. Of course, like we're not going to, there's a lot of powers that be that don't want to move away from the industrial system because there's big profits for big companies.
Right. And there's a revolving door between, like, I like to say, you know, like if you have the hospital, the pharmacy, and the Kentucky Fried Chicken right next to each other, it's like a perfect cycle of like, go eat crap, get sick, take pharmaceutical, get side effects. And then you feel too sick to cook, so you go eat the junk food, and then you get sicker, and then you go back to the hospital, and you go in a circle. But I don't know, I'm voting for Team Human because like we may be too dense and stubborn and slow to like catch up in time. But I'd like just to give it a shot. And as consumers, you know, I see some people say you can't change it, it's too blah, blah, blah. But that's what people thought about slavery. And that's what people thought about like the gay movement. And that's what people thought about so many things, about even organics. That people thought organics will never take off. No one's going to eat kale. No one's going to eat spinach. Like, are you crazy? Like, and like it's changed, right? No one's going to recycle. Americans aren't going to recycle. It's happening. So we are like, as we're collective consciousness, and as individuals, we each vote with our actions, with our thoughts, with our beliefs, with our and with our purchases. And so by supporting sustainable businesses like Jessica's, like Forage, and going to a farmer's market, supporting local farmers who grow without chemicals, whether they're certified or not, that you trust, by there's so many things we can be doing. And maybe it's hard. Maybe I get sugar snap peas that are in a single-use plastic bag because I like sugar snap peas every once in a while. I wish I could get them loose. But anyway, so yeah, maybe we can't do it all perfectly, but if we just kind of do our best and we do it from love, then it feels good. There's something about it, something in us. There's a deep knowing inside of us that when we're connecting to the people who raise and source our food, when we're making homemade food, when we're cooking and we're like playing music and dancing in your kitchen while you cook and looking at the beauty of a bell pepper, or like the miracle of an eggplant or whatever, or the like basil leaves, like in the fragrance, like when we can fall back in love with the miracle of nature, which is what we are, and let that really guide us and have the courage to just break away. You know, I think people are afraid of being left out. I say this a lot. So if you've heard me talk, you've heard me say this. People are afraid of feeling left out if they do something different. I'm like, yeah, what are you going to be left out of? Cancer, heart disease, autoimmunity, disability, dementia, Alzheimer's, destroying the planet, being miserable, being depressed, being bipolar, being like, you know, having anxiety, having panic attacks. Really, you feel bad being left out of that, because when we're willing to do something different, not to be pushing against or being superior or whatever, you know, not in a way that's like arrogant, but with humility and love, to just like say, I'm going to choose, I'm going to opt out of what's causing pain inside of me and to others in the planet and other creatures. And I'm going to, you know, I'm going to like opt for what works with the big picture of nature, the intelligence of nature. It is amazing what can heal. I forget sometimes, I run into people that are saying, my so-and-so father, mother, sister, brother, partner had this, whatever illness, and then we had to, whatever they did, because that's what they thought was the only way out. Or like, you know, I had a Uber driver who was like, oh, I got on ADD meds when I was a teenager, and then I started having anxiety, of course, because ADD meds are like speed, that's like meth. And so, and then they put her on Xanax, and she's in her 50s, yeah, still on Xanax and ADD Brutal. Meds, and she's miserable and has all these other health problems. And she's like, what? I didn't have to do this. There was another way I can get off my meds. And I'm not a doctor. I can't tell people to get off their meds. But what ends up happening when people work with me is they just stop needing their meds. Like their doctors take them off the road. They take themselves, whatever. Like that's, I'm not a clinician. You know, I'm a patient advocate. I'm a coach. I'm a consultant. I'm an educator. I can order labs, work with supplements and herbs and lifestyle. But the point is, everything you're saying, everything, the essence of what you're saying, it's about working with nature. It's mimicking nature. It's like, how does nature work? Like, all great scientific discoveries came from mimicking something from nature, like looking, how does nature work, and then how can we work with it? Unfortunately, we sometimes get greedy or ignorant or short-sighted, and we're like, oh, how can we synthesize that or make a fake version of it so now we can patent it and make money off of it? And I'm not saying that always backfires, but often it does, you know. And so yeah, like one of the points I wanted to make, you and I talked about this, and I don't know if, did you get to finish your point? I might have interrupted you.
Yeah. I like your
I wanted to just kind of to wrap up. I'm trying to like wrap this up and put a bow on it. But one of the things I wanted to say is, like, for example, it's not natural to take acres and acres of land and only grow soybeans. And then if another plant pops up, be like, you're a weed, let's kill you with toxic chemicals that destroy your intestinal lining and cause cancer. You know, and then look at all the like animals, like all the mammals that get killed in big ag, like in the vegetable industry and you know, so like growing I'm not saying we have another alternative. We were talking about, Jess and I were talking about from compassion, like how do you make that much food for that many people using regenerative agriculture on scale for the whole planet? You know?
We don't have that figured out, you know, but I don't think we have to have it figured out to start. And I don't think
we can at least support organic,
you know. I think it's so funny when people get into these arguments about debating on whether it will work or not on a large scale. I'm like, who cares, man? The system right now is a giant failure. I mean, it's worked to get this giant population and all the things that we have now, but it's not a sustainable system. It's going to crash and burn. Like, we're going to be screwed eventually because we're depleting our soil, and it's just like the microbiome of the soil is similar to the microbiome of the gut, right? Like you have to have a healthy gut microbiome. You have to have a healthy soil microbiome for everything to work. And we're kind of going to get to the precipice eventually of where it's already stopping working. You know, we've been using technology. We're just like throwing technology at it over and over. And just to like kind of bring a few points home in terms of like describing that industrial plant agriculture but industrial plant agriculture. I mean, like the amount of fossil fuel, if you're not going to farm organically using like cow manure and blood meal and bone meal, you know, the reality is, which people like to ignore, you're going to end up using fossil fuel derived pesticides, fertilizers, herbicides, and or mined. Like, I just learned about this recently, but you know, people know the term blood diamond. They're now calling it like blood phosphate, because having to mine the phosphate to fertilize and our you know, all the food that we're growing. It's important for all the food we're growing because we use extractive chemicals to, you know, to farm our foods. That causes like practically wars, right? Like there's some serious
then it causes
issues
war in our biology.
All
too.
Industrial farming, not just animal industrial farming.
Right.
But there's a better system if you can access that. And we've got such good programs now that are becoming accessible to a lot of people, depending on where you live. I mean, there's food deserts or whatnot, but just to throw out, because I know it becomes this like, oh, you're privileged and you're saying this or not. But like, I went through the whole rigmarole to accept EBT because I find that important. I grew up on EBT. Like I understand my family we didn't give a shit about if we were eating healthy food because we didn't know if we were going to have a roof over our head. This is a real problem for a lot of people. But I mean, there's a lot of solutions to that, I'm sure. But aside from that, there's programs like YNI Comp that's doing prescriptions for whole foods. So you can go to the doctor, will give you a prescription to go to the farmer's market to get whole foods in YNI. And you also can like double your EBT over there. So, I mean, I feel like there's little things, these small regional food systems, kind of Ahupua'a style, are now popping up. We've got people like FarmLink doing these deliveries and accepting EBT as well, and just more access to that. And I'm hopeful, and I'm also hopeful that people are gonna hear little things like this or experience poor health themselves and be motivated enough to make a change, right? Because you have to have the motivation. And I'm so glad that like what you do exists. I actually kind of I want you to like do my labs and find out, like where I'm at. Okay. Although my acupuncturist seems to think I seem pretty healthy, so
you look
good. Thanks. I don't know. I'm inspired by it all. I used to get really down on all of this stuff. I used to be so depressed about it. Well, maybe this is the organ blend helping me, but I really do stay positive about it. I'm like, like, and maybe because I'm part, doing something in the realm, but I am inspired by a lot of the information getting out to people that are like little seeds of thought or hope or change. And then it's like this slow progress of like getting your health back, and especially mental health. Like you're right. Like I feel like mental health is first and foremost, because I am not going to get out of bed and go do anything good for myself until my head feels good, right? Like,
but sometimes it's tricky because if you don't go do something good for yourself, you're not going to correct the biology to make the chemicals of happiness. So it's like a top down, bottom up. I teach people top down, bottom up. You got to do the top part, you got to do the bottom up part. You got to do all of it. And I think at the end of the day, it's important to understand you can have ways of raising animal products that heal the earth, and you can support animal products that destroy the earth. There are ways of raising, plant products that destroy the earth, and there are ways of, raising plant products that regenerate the earth. So it's not whether it's plant or animal, it's whether it's regenerative or not. That's what I'm trying to say. And you can be an omnivore and not destroy the planet. Now, if you choose, because like it breaks my heart to eat a mammal or eat an animal or something that had a brain or heartbeat, then and you feel good and you can digest those foods and whatever, and you thrive, that's wonderful. Just understand that not everybody thrives eating that way. So we need solutions for people whose genetics and biology do not thrive as a vegan or even a vegetarian.
And I will say I've met a lot of failed vegans because of what I do, because they tend to gravitate toward, if somebody's going to start eating meat, even after 10 years, they'll find someone like me that's got good sources. And I have come across so many people that, I mean, the most I've seen people after like 10 years of vegan, just health so wrecked, and they held on for so long. And then within like a month of incorporating animal foods back into their diet, it's like a different person. It's incredible to watch. It is absolutely incredible to watch, and I've seen it a lot because of what I do. And I will say it's risky. It's definitely risky to have a diet with no animal foods, and we don't have any history of any civilizations eating strictly plant-based. Now we have supplements.
We talked about that.
Algae, like if you can incorporate, sea moss and algae into your diet, you're going to be able to have other sources maybe of, I don't consider that plant-based, to tell you the truth, but you can potentially make it happen if you have the good genetics. But it is a risky thing, and there is like higher rates of depression. Vegans have up to 60% more depression from if they're low in vitamin B12 and things like that. So it's something to consider if you haven't considered it, and if you might be struggling with that sort of thing.
And again, we're all different. We said this earlier on, if you join later, like we're not trying to say you have to be one way or the other. We're just saying, we want to open up possibility. And like one of the things I get people who are they're exhausted, they're sick, they feel they have mental issues, they have gut issues because of all the nuts and the legumes they're eating that their body's not tolerating and their microbiome can't support. And like if you can just remove the shame, say, hey, we're part of a food chain. We're on a planet where everything eats everything.
Yeah.
You know, so like
there's something to live,
it's
something must
hard
die.
pill to swallow. I struggle with it too sometimes. I love
Me
animals.
too.
I would snuggle a cow, but then I relocate cockroaches. I don't even kill them. Like I talk to them and I'm like, bye, get out of here. You know, I try not to leave food for them. Like I love animals and I struggle with it too. But one of the things I'm saying is like I'm a human on a body in a body on a planet where I'm part of a food chain. I didn't create it. It's what nature is. It's what nature does. And I can either be angry at it and push against it, or I can just try to find acceptance and do it in a way that is the most sacred and respectful possible.
Yeah.
And that's my choice.
That's...
I just try to unshame. I try to unshame being part of the, you know, an omnivorous like food chain. And then I try to like dispel the myth that it's a health problem. Like it's bad for your health to eat meat. It's not bad for your health to eat meat.
Yeah,
that's
that is
a myth.
definitely not proven.
Yeah, that it has to destroy the planet. That's another myth. If you buy from someone like Jess or White Oak Pastures or whatever, it's not. And then at the end of the day, you just have to decide in your heart and in your biology what's best for you. And if really what's best for you biologically or emotionally or whatever is being vegan or vegetarian, go for it. We support you. But you feel like you really need some animal products and you're craving meat and you just feel guilty or sad or like you're going to destroy the earth or be a bad person or give yourself a heart attack, then let yourself off the hook. That's not real.
Yeah, I feel responsible. I have like crisis every so many months, realizing how many I'm responsible for the death of a lot of animals because I'm selling as much meat as I sell, and I have to. It's a hard thing for me, and I've put myself in a place of hunting and fishing because I feel as a meat eater, I personally have this thing where I feel like I need to do that. If I'm going to eat an animal, and I should know what it's like to take that thing's life. And you know what? It's giving me the most respect and appreciation for animals and how my animals live and how they're killed and all those things, because it's so hard. It's a hard thing to do, and I don't know any hunter who finds it fun or easy to just like, yeah, let's kill things. Like fishermen is like, well, maybe fish is a little different. But most of the people I know find that to be a hard process. A lot of farmers and ranchers I know find that very hard because they love and respect their animals, but they understand, the circle of life, and also they know they're doing so much more and so much better because these animals lived a good life and they're dying they've lived with respect and they're dying with respect. And I know we should wrap it up, but we could talk about this for hours because it's like my favorite subject. But
that's the whole way this was born, is because I would go to the farmers market. We would get in these conversations, and there are people in line waiting to buy meat, and then we're off to the side, and we're like, I'm.
Then you started coming at the end. You just come at the end, and I remember like sitting there for like half an hour, like talking about all the things. I've kind of I've dropped off a little bit and being super hardcore about all that information because I kind of get a little overwhelmed, and now I see it popping up in a lot of the influencers that I follow and stuff. So it's nice that it gets out there, but hopefully we can pull some nice little clips off of this conversation and share them with our friends.
If you follow me, I encourage you to follow Jess, whether you live in Hawaii or not, because she has great inspiration, content, whatever. And then is your new, like the drop shipping, is that just going to be in Hawaii?
It's just the state of Hawaii, yeah.
Okay.
I have people that ask me to send to the mainland, but like the whole point of my business is food security in Hawaii. So like we're trying to keep it here.
Great.
Yeah.
But there are people like you. There are people like you more and more all over. And White Oak Pastures is a place on the mainland that does ship. But it isn't very, there's a lot of
they ship to Hawaii.
Stuff, so,
Oh, because you have people in the mainland. I work with great sources
people all over the planet.
Mainland.
Like I have people in different countries on the mainland and stuff, so that's why I'm saying that. But
but you're a girl if you're in Hawaii.
Yeah. And I do have like if you're feel free to follow either of us if you're not following us both. And then I have on my website, like I have a free resource that is it's this neuroscience hack, it's this brain trick, it's something you can do. It's a meditation that works for people that suck at meditation. And it's something you do with your focus and your brain that takes 15 minutes that can take you from being completely anxious or depressed or overwhelmed or sad or angry or just dysregulated, we call it, down to it can downright blissful. It also helps you with insomnia. Like if you have trouble with waking up and falling asleep, or waking up in the middle of the night and getting back to sleep. This is the reason I put that up there. I'm going to change it soon to something different, but like I want people to experience their self-healing superpowers. I want people to know like we can just use our consciousness and our focus to change our biology, but we also need to support our biology through the way we're living and eating so that we can have the kind of mind and emotions that's going to help us thrive in the world, not only feel good ourselves, but make a difference, make the world a better place. So it's innergeniushealth.com. Also, if you're interested in working with me, I do 30-minute consults with potential clients. So there's an apply to work with me button there. And please check out Jess at the Farmers Markets. Just check out her website, Forage. You can place orders there. You can see where the farmers markets are and where to find her. So thank you guys so much for attended, or anyone who ends up watching the replay of this. I'll be posting the replay, and I'll figure out a way to get it to you so you can post it too.
Yeah.
And
This is the first time I've done this like this.
Yay.
Yay.
Anyway, this is awesome, guys.
Okay, we'll have to do some more. Thank you, Traci. I really appreciate it. And maybe I'll hop on a call with you after just to wrap it up.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, good.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.